Welcome to another episode of Million Dollar Stories, where we get to interview authors from all over the world. I think if you have a message to share with the world and you have the courage and the conviction to put it in a book and let the world read about it, then I want to broadcast you as much as possible. The guy that we have today, his name is Lee Vinsel, The Innovation Delusion. That's his book. How our obsession with the new has disrupted the work that matters most. Lee, thank you so much for being here, and tell us a little bit about the genesis behind why you wrote this book.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, there's a bit of a backstory to it. Um, you know, innovation had just become such a kind of empty buzzword in so many domains of life, whether it's higher education or journalism or the tech world. It's not like innovation doesn't matter, but the use of the word had just kind of gotten so out of control that it just felt empty to us,
Everything's a
And
disruption, right? I think you said that
exactly.
very well. Yes.
Exactly. And so, I co-wrote the book with my buddy Andy Russell. And, we had just kind of gotten sick of the way the word was being used. And then Walter Isaacson's book, The Innovators, How a Group of Hackers, Geniuses, and Geeks Created the Digital Revolution, came out. And Andy joked that we should answer that book with one called The Maintainers, How Bureaucrats, Standards Engineers, and Introverts Create Technologies That Kind of Work Most of the Time. And, and that we just played with that on Twitter and in blogs back when blogs were a thing, and it just kind of took
They're still a
off.
thing.
Like,
what are you talking about?
It kind of, it just resonated with people because I think they understood, they saw what we were seeing too. And so the Innovation Delusion, we took a couple of years to write the book and interview a bunch of people. And it's kind of, it's about, first of all, how our use of the word innovation developed historically, because it's a post-World War II thing, and how it actually has use of the word has diverged from actual innovation, because our use of the word innovation is going up and up and up. You can show with quantitative tools, but there's no measure that says our actual innovation is going up and up and up. It's just you can't see it in economic measures. So that's the first thing, is that our talk has kind of diverged from reality. But we also argue that the way we talk about innovation distracts us from other things, like all the maintenance and care and repair work that just keeps our world going, Mm-hmm. And so that's a big part of the book, is just talking about all this work we kind of take for granted, but is really essential to life. Yeah.
Well, you did talk about, and I think it might have been in this book or the other one. I just did a quick little review of it, but infrastructure in general. Now,
Mm-hmm.
I just came back from Utah and I drove Route 66. All right.
Wow.
I
Yep.
love
Classic.
the Americana behind that road.
Yeah.
And nobody drives it anymore, simply because Route 40 or Interstate 40 or all the other roads. And so there's a lot that's being left behind simply because of this obsession to constantly make things faster. Now, you could say it's either good or bad, but is that what you kind of highlight, that certain things that are so great are actually being forgotten?
Well, that's part of it. I mean, so we do need to talk about how to put things to bed when they're done, right? I mean, because sometimes we're just it's all right to be all right, we're not going to use that stretch of road anymore. Let's just let the deer and squirrels take it over or whatever, But it's also that, the way US federal policy works, it encourages localities to build bridges and roads and all this stuff. But then they're promising to take care of it, and they don't actually have the tax dollars to do so. So we're erecting all this infrastructure that already we have a lot of badly maintained infrastructure around. That's obvious. Route 66 probably had many stretches that were that way, right?
Oh, yes.
And then we're continuing to build more without really having any notion of how we're going to pay for that maintenance down the road. Yeah.
So it's almost like a short-sightedness that's really crushing the economy, the market, the people, basically, simply because, hey, we can build it, but who's going to maintain it?
And then because we're historians and social scientists, one question is what are the incentive structures that are leading people to short-term thinking? Right? Because if we think of an example like the DuPont family, they own the DuPont Corporation. Well, that was their legacy. They were kind of a dynasty, right? That was their legacy. So they did a lot of long-term thinking. They took bets on big things down the road, right? But recently, since the 1980s, it's really been driven by quarterly reports and a lot of things that drive corporations and governments to short-term thinking. And so that's part of what we're trying to question. You really put your finger on it, the short-termism, some people call it.
Well, a quick little review of your bio. I believe you have a history in Pittsburgh, right? I am in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Did you grow up in Pittsburgh? Because I think you said the mascot of your school was Steelman. Is that right?
No, I came from Joliet, Illinois, which is also a Rust Belt town. So we share the Rust Belt, vibe.
But you went to Carnegie Mellon. Is that right?
You got it. Yeah,
Beautiful.
I lived in Pittsburgh for 4 years. I love Pittsburgh. It's a great place.
Nice. So what did you study in Carnegie Mellon? Was it this exact topic?
No, I wrote about automobile regulation first, like how government makes technology safer and less polluting. But I did do some research on maintenance, actually, with a professor at Carnegie Mellon. And basically, the way to think about it is I was trained in the history of technology is my primary field I was trained in, and business history. And then with a focus on how, the relationship between government and business and technology is really my core interest.
Gotcha. Now, I think we could probably go into this for hours and hours, but the greatest innovation that I've ever seen in the past, let's just say 30 years, is AI, Chat GPT, and all of the stuff that's coming down the pike with that. What are your thoughts on it, man? Is there any way to stop it? Because yes, it is going to change how everything is done, in my opinion. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm not sure about that yet. I mean, so I think it usually takes a couple years for new technologies to show up in either kind of aggregate economic measures like productivity, for instance, or even for us to have really solid research on like how organizations are adopting and using it and changing their practices. Because if it's going to change the world, it's going to have to be that we're like changing the way our organizations work as a result of this, right? Like we're doing things with less people, as an example.
Right.
And so, I'm kind of like in a wait and see mode. I have a lot of friends who are, I have some friends who are quite excited about it and really do think it's earth shifting. And I have other friends who study the same topics who think it's like not going to be nearly as big of a deal as people think. So my community is divided at this point.
Got it. Okay. So a couple things that we're using AI for is one, it is an audiobook. Now, I didn't realize that I could upload a 90-second clip of my voice and then upload a document that's 2 hours of me of just written dialogue, and then it can spit out me speaking it almost dead on, so dead on that my dad can't even tell the difference. Now, I want to take that one step further and say, you know what? If that could be done with a document that I'm uploading, well, why not with somebody asking a question on the website? And if it's going to be them asking a question and the answer is going to be there through a standard operating procedure that AI can just pull from and it can just read it to them, well, that's just going to be an audio file that could be read to the listener. Take it one step further from that. Now you have visual AI where it is almost spot on. So eventually we're going to get on a website and I'm going to talk to the website and say, hey, how much is this service? And the owner of the company, whether it's Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos or whatnot, they're going to talk to me directly as if they're standing there. Now, that to me is absolutely insane. I would never have believed it 2 years ago, and I'm starting to see it come to life now. So, yes, it will change the world, but holy smokes, what else is going to be affected by that? How much fraud, right? How much insanity that could create. So I'm with you. There's a lot of good with innovation, but man, what's the consequence?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think that, I've written a bit about this in the MIT Sloan Management Review and some other places recently. I mean, I think that the reality is we're really bad at predicting where technology is going to go. So whenever we see a new technology that has a lot of energy and leads to technology bubbles, investment bubbles, which I think we're seeing happening with AI right now, see a lot of strong predictions around what's going to happen as a result of them. Those usually don't come true. But to go to where you ended, the other part of that are like our predictions usually don't come true, but we also can't foresee all the changes that are going to come. Right? We're really bad at foreseeing those predictions, like those things that actually are going to shift. And I think we all can see that, this generative AI is some kind of real improvement over where we were a couple of years ago even, right? And so like now the question is, how does it play out, right? I mean, we have a lot of predictions about how it's going to play out. I would say history shows usually don't work, but we also, the fun thing will be seeing where it does show up, which I don't know. And that's why I love following this stuff, because it's always a surprise.
Are you paying attention to any type of, whether it's forums, or how are you starting to do your research on this? Because I'm thinking of just, from what I'm seeing out in the marketplace, cars that drive themselves, trucks that drive themselves, right? I have a client, we help people write books, but I have a client that actually has a burger joint that's completely robotic. Right. So, and this is the very beginning, right? We're starting to see this insanity now. I am so thankful I was born in 1984 that I am not born right now in a world where I would wake up with a phone in my hand. I'm so glad I woke up in the woods on dirt bikes and playing hockey.
We're not that far away from each other age-wise, so I hear you. I'm with you.
So, that's good. So do you agree with me that, I mean, I think it's a very scary situation. But this is a very good thing for this moment we're in right now for entrepreneurs or people who can see how this is the greatest tool, and if leveraged properly, the next 20 years will be very special for us. But those who do not use it properly will only be hurt with job removal, with being, kind of left behind. So where do you look for research, but also where do you see it going? I guess it's sort of up in the air.
No, I mean, so I can talk about research, and then I can talk about teaching too, which I think gets to your thing about skills and knowledge that you ended on there. I mean, I think on the research thing, I really try to really closely follow folks who are knowledgeable about this and are studying it in the field. So I'm not very interested in speculation, actually, because again, I think predictions you're generally lousy. But I am interested in, social scientists and other people who like go into organizations and watch with their eyeballs what's happening there. And I think we can also, sometimes gain perspective even on subreddits of like fields of people like applying this in their workspace and talking through it together. Those can be handy places to kind of watch the change. And then, I'll just keep watching the news although the news can be very unreliable, sadly. Even the Wall Street Journal is terrible on these topics sometimes.
I would agree with that. I don't trust anything really what the media is saying out there anymore. So that would be, you got to look at it. If you watch it, you're misinformed, but if you don't watch it, you're uninformed, I guess is the best way to put
exactly. It. So we need kind of media literacy and teach people how to be critical readers and assess what they're being told. But in that, so they bring to the education thing, as you can probably imagine, in higher education and in K-12, when ChatGPT came out, people really freaked out, right? Totally freaked out. And they're like, oh, this is going to change. That's all. The students are going to be cheating and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, actually, if we do our jobs well and work with students to develop essays that they have to, for instance, defend in class orally, and are doing things we probably should have been doing for ages anyway, because frankly, the college essay has sucked for years. It's not been great as a tool. Then we'll do better at our jobs, and our students will be, better thinkers as a result. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing that, we didn't touch on when you were talking about the potentials of ChatGPT earlier is, AI experts like Gary Marcus, as an example. He has a huge Twitter following. He really thinks the so-called hallucination issue, so the fact that AI just like makes stuff up, ChatGPT will just make up citations and facts and totally lie. I mean, it just makes things up right now. OpenAI says they're working on that, but Gary Marcus and other AI experts think that's never going to go away, right? And so then the question becomes like, where can we trust these things to be used, and how are we going to end up using them in organizations and stuff like that to do our work? And I think, frankly, teaching our students how to use these tools, but still be critical thinkers and to do editing and revision and just think well, that I think is never going to go away as a skill. So I'm still kind of a defender of just like, teach the kids well, like, let's do a good job,
Yeah. I think that what you bring up a very good point there, where students are going to just rely upon it. and he or she, whoever controls that switchboard, could really brainwash a large population, unless there are many ways to go about getting that information. And I'm glad you brought up how, yeah, maybe this is the time to buckle down and kind of strengthen things that were weak within the school system, such as
Exactly.
public speaking and becoming more
Yep.
articulate and defending your positions rather than
Totally.
just handing in a piece of paper and just being graded
Yeah.
on it.
I
So
mean,
I think
yeah.
mediocrity will not be tolerated in the future, right? If you are great at what you do and you're the best at it, you will always be taken care of as long as you are constantly progressing and strengthening your skills. But the
Yeah.
individuals who are wanting to not read a book ever again, and by the way, there's a stat out there, 58% of people never read a book outside of high school ever again. Scary numbers, right? So if you are never going to grow outside of school, you are going to be left behind. But if you constantly take these tools and develop new skills and provide
Hmm.
more value to the workplace, I think you're going to be safe. And therefore, you're not looking at just one income stream. You're going to take these skill sets and apply it to many. So I think it's a great thing for those who are in the know, but the ones who are not, it's going to be like two worlds, I think. So that's my prediction.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, and I think that there's people in economics and technology studies who are with you. I think like Tyler Cowen has that book, like Normal is Over, or something like that.
Hmm.
My friend Matt Bean, who looks at robots and AI, has made similar arguments that, like, you're not going to be able to kind of get by with like kind of half-baked approach to things. So I mean, that's a possibility. Yeah. And going back about, like, defending, like being able to speak and then defending your point, I still go back to Socrates and Plato,
Oh,
and I think,
Socrates,
like,
you're a stoic guy. I can tell. That's great.
and Socrates, what's he doing? He's hanging out with people and asking them really probing questions about what they tell him, and I think, like, that is a skill that, being able to hang out in those situations, not freak out, not get angry, and like keep your cool and think on the spot is, a skill that never goes away in terms of value. So, yeah.
So this, I'm glad you brought up Socrates. The reason why we have a ghostwriting process in place is because of the Socratic method: question, answer, question, answer. You only get good answers if you have good questions. And I think
Mhm.
individuals who are constantly asking themselves deeper and deeper questions obtain self-awareness, and that gives them such an advantage over others.
Mhm.
And so where do you put the responsibility? I mean, for someone to understand where this innovation is going to take us, it's either one of two places. It's either the family system needs to start to understand
Yeah.
the ability to start asking better questions and becoming more convicted with their approach with life, if that's the best way to put it. They have more
Mhm.
conviction with where they're going. Or is it the school system? Now, I believe the school system needs some work when it comes to this, because it's all about having individuals think more freely, more independently. So that's where I put the blame. But what do you think is the best approach? Is it
No, I'm
both?
with you, man. I mean, I like, I don't want to do an either or with family and schools, but I mean, I think we both agree that the public school system, especially in this country, is failing us in all kinds of ways. And so then
Mm-hmm.
we have to think about how we could improve that. And sadly, I think the reality, as inequality, economic inequality in our country grows, we're seeing it play out with education too. Like the kids of poor families and families that don't have much, they're not doing well educationally. And, they're not getting the kind of education and learning how to ask questions, learning how to be mentally fluent that richer kids are. We see that in all kinds of measures. So, like, I mean, yeah, it's real. You're bringing up really deep and difficult questions there, like how to make it so that the poorer families can have enough brain space and time and money to do the things the richer families are doing, and then how to revise our school system. These are two enormous questions that are obviously interlinked in all kinds of ways, because our public school system is based on tax revenues, for instance. But these are very deep questions.
So
Yeah.
it's almost like the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and it's almost like you could see this innovation, you could see what you want to see, and maybe that's how life is in general. Uh,
Yeah.
but when it comes to, and I've interviewed hundreds of entrepreneurs, and many of them are multimillionaires, and I realized after interviewing them, it's like they're looking through a different lens. And it's what shaped my career outside of college. I read this book. Have you ever read Rich Dad Poor Dad?
Oh yeah, I read that in college. That
Okay.
was like, yeah. Uh-huh.
It changed my life. And so afterwards, I got into real estate, became an entrepreneur, all that. But when I read it, I'm thinking to myself, why didn't my dad teach me this? Well, he might
Mhm.
not have known. Why didn't the school system give me this book? Did college give you that book? I'm assuming you read it on your own.
Yeah, yeah. It was. I knew a guy who was into it.
Yeah,
Another
so
college student. Yeah.
but it to me it was very eye-opening. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, now I'm on the right path, but why wasn't this book given to me when I was younger? Because I think it could have saved a lot of money and a lot of
Yeah.
time. So what I realized is that the information from the rich given to their kids is way different. So the information, the books are different, right?
That's interesting theses. Yeah, I hear you. I mean,
So
I think the other reality, like there was a classic like Forbes or Fortune article where like the most common denominator between successful entrepreneurs was the fact that they have rich parents, right? And that's because like having wealthy parents buys you bandwidth and kind of gives you a safety net for you to kind of like take risks in a way that a lot of people just can't because they're living hand to mouth, And so I hear you. And I think that there's a cultural thing, like you're saying, there's what's being conveyed, but there's also these structural things going on that make it that way too. Yeah.
And I've read some statistics where the most millionaires in today's society are actually first generation millionaires, and it does come from maybe not their parents were wealthy, but they were given the right resources, and that could be a
Mm-hmm.
book, or a philosophy on life in general.
Yeah.
So, uh,
Mentors, all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
right, yeah. So why wouldn't, if there are 100 millionaires out there saying read these books, listen to these podcasts, listen to Jim Rohn, why wouldn't they just say the school system, all right, so you guys are all wealthy and millionaires, what are you guys teaching your kids? We're going to take that and put it into our school, and hopefully they can become free and successful too. Why isn't that happening? I know that's
Well,
a
I mean,
deep question for you,
no, I
but
no,
what
no,
is that?
I think you're putting your finger on how we just don't teach really practical stuff in school anymore in ways that, we never taught what you're pointing to, but we used to teach like bookkeeping and kind of fiscal responsibility and even basic investment stuff in classes. And there was home ec and there was all these other kinds of things.
Gone, right?
We've,
It's all gone.
we've become extremely focused on getting students into college in ways that are unhealthy, frankly. And it's all college prep. And so it's become very brainy and not practical. And just to drive your point home, like I'm not wealthy by any means, but I am a college professor, so I have time and I have enough resources that I can, give my children opportunities that many other children in this country don't have. But I also, like my daughter's into making slime. It's like this stuff it's like this whole scene right now. And so, she's opened up like a slime business, and we've talked about how branding and how all these things work. And, I've taken my kids to the industrial design studios on Virginia Tech's campus where I teach and shown them the 3D printing labs and like all the kind of machines that are around and how design education works. And so that's wonderful for my children and they get an immense amount out of it. I bet it will do well by them in the future. But just think about all the kids who aren't getting those kinds of, aren't being exposed to all these ideas. So yeah, man, I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think there's all kinds of things we're not passing down, sadly, between families and schools. Yeah.
Within your book, do you present a solution? I mean, you have 107 reviews, and I commend you for that. That's hard to get that many reviews. So, do you present a solution or a next step or a recipe for what to do from this point forward?
Well, we really focus the solution side of it. I could write a whole other book on how we could do innovation and innovation policy better, but that's not this book. So this book really focuses on how to do maintenance and like operations better, basically how to run businesses and keep things going, including infrastructure. And so, we have a kind of 4-point thing. I can't even remember the 4 points because it's been a while since I went to that chapter. I remember some of them. I mean, some of it's about leadership. So it's leadership, culture, what we call innovation and maintenance, like constant improvement, the fact that even our maintenance routines can be improved over time. And then there might be there's another one that I can't remember. But then the question is just like, honestly, I mean, it's kind of like your podcast, right? I mean, where we end in the epilogue is about the need for conversation and how we can have better conversations in our workplaces and in institutions like churches and schools and homes about how to do these kinds of things better. And like, you know, I guess we're kind of, you know, Andy and I are humanities guys, right? I got a philosophy undergraduate degree, then a PhD in history. Andy's been in history the whole time. You know, we believe in the power of ideas in conversation ultimately. And that's kind of like where we ended the story. Yeah.
No, I have a philosophy on government. I don't think they ever really have the solution. And if you have the mentality that they always will take care of you, you're going to be sorely disappointed. So in your book, are you talking about higher regulation, lower regulation? Are you talking about other things that are maybe not discussed when it comes to government? But
well, in my first book, is actually saying we should regulate more in a sense, but only when we really think it's going to work. And the whole point of the kinds of regulations we've used, especially for like clean air regulations on cars, is that no, government does not have the solution, but that's not what we don't require them. Actually, when government tries to come up with a solution, it doesn't work. We can show that in lots of different ways.
I always say that.
But what we can do is hold corporations responsible, for example, decreasing the amount of pollution that's coming out of this or that thing, or making this technology safer. And then we create tests like crash tests and tailpipe tests and all these kinds of things and say, hey, corporation, you are going to fix this technology so that it no longer does whatever we care about, whatever we don't want it to do. You figure out how to do it. And then the corporations are coming up with the solutions. And we're just like saying that as a democracy, we're not willing to put up with this danger or this form of pollution or this health issue or whatever. And so it's really about not government coming up with solutions, but finding democratic ways to get corporations to come up with solutions. You know,
do you see that on the mass scale of the world? Because whenever I hear regulation in the US, I think of, oh, you know what, in China and other places, they will never abide by the regulations that we set forth.
This is a very deep issue. This is a very deep issue. And I mean, like, look, China is now putting out more greenhouse gases than like the US and Europe combined. You know, and so like that's a deep problem. On the other hand, on a per capita basis, the US still puts out more greenhouse gases than any country on the planet, right? I mean, other than like oil producing nations. And so it's like there's a moral argument to be had that like, you know, we should ask China to reduce. And in fact, Biden, you know, they just announced they are going to work on it, supposedly. We'll see if that happens. You know, and so we should ask China to reduce, but there's also probably moral work for the US to do a lot more than we are doing currently, is my take on it. Yeah.
So what have you seen over the past 20, 30 years that's uplifting for the listeners, that maybe we are going in the right direction, or maybe we're going in the wrong direction? So with your research, I'm assuming that you've probably come across some data that's either good or very bad.
Well, no, I just pay attention to these issues. So I'm working on I have another book project right now, and I don't know. I mean, it's a good history of blank jobs, and so it's about kind of poverty and economic hardship in the United States, and why it is that like 35% of working American households, this is not people on welfare, this is 35% of working American households can barely afford to make ends meet, and why that is the case. And, you know, so I can tell negative stories like that one, but, you know, I feel, to be honest, we have to also be real about improvements. Okay, so here's one improvement. Since the 1990s, childhood poverty has gone down like 60% or something like that.
Wow.
In the United States. And it has to do with how we do earned income tax credit and all this kind of stuff, right? I mean, we give poor families more than we used to in certain kinds of ways. So that's great. You know, that doesn't mean those kids are doing well, because again, like there's a large band of American households that don't fit definitions of poverty, but still aren't doing well in any way whatsoever, right? But still, the fact that we reduced that by 60% says a lot.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I think that, you know, globally, this is like people doubt progress and stuff like that, and, you know, poop on progress. But, you know, globally, we've seen more people exit poverty in the last 30 years or so than we have ever seen in human history.
Yes.
And so, you know, here's one fun book. I don't agree with everything in this book, but I like to keep it around just to keep me on my toes. It's called 10 Global Trends Every Smart Person Should Know. It's an annoying title. I hate it. But it's just full of It's full of fun examples of things that have gotten a lot better, including declining violence and other kinds of things, that we don't pay attention to because the news media likes to feed us negativity because it
Right.
gets clicks. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I think over the past 30 years, when you involve the internet and then you have certain programs like the Fivers of the world or virtual assistants, I just look at so much opportunity has been given to us that if you have your eyes open and if you're being fed the right information, you could do wonders with what has been given to us. So I look at this as the greatest time to be alive. I'm so thankful we have all these tools and resources.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually, when you get into all kinds of internet regulation, and it always scares me with what YouTube's doing and Google's doing, but as
You're
long as
scared of censorship. Is that what you mean?
yeah, for sure,
Uh-huh.
because all you got to do is get a couple people in a room that say, you know what, we don't want people to know how to become free financially, so we're going to limit this, and this, and therefore that can't be seen, or it's going to be on the third page of Google. And then
Yeah.
individuals who are looking for an opportunity, who go to Google, who go to YouTube, and they can't find the solution, but they're fed other information and their brains are at a stage where it just soaks in and adopts that belief pattern for the rest of their life, or at least up until their late 30s. It's like the Plato's the allegory of the cave. Have you read that? I'm assuming
Sure.
you
Yeah.
have.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's a moment in time where individuals will either wake up or stay asleep, or choose to stay asleep. It's almost like the pain is too great for me to open up my eyes and go outside that cave, that it's better to stay inside. So it's better for individuals to do this at a young age. And I think that with censorship, it limits that. So with
Mm-hmm.
innovation, it's great with everything that's happening, but you're getting a lot of control. The moment that, and we can get very deep into this, but the moment that you get into the mark of the beast, or you start to have little chips in you to pay for things, great innovation, it sounds like, very scary, because it could be very much a control lever for individuals. So that's where I think it could go, but you got to be
Mm-hmm.
awake and you got to be open to seeing the right information. So I think it's very good at this time, very bad for people who are not accessing the right information, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you put in a, you put your finger on a really deep issue when you bring up several of the topics you've questions and kind of thoughts that you've offered, which is that I used to have this thing I said in classes. I haven't said it in a long time, but it was in my undergraduate classes, and I used to say, look, and I was kind of being fictitious, because the numbers don't really line up, but I was like, there's a third of you who already are thinkers and are excited, and like, you're going to teach yourself no matter what I do. You're already on you're good, right? And there's a third of you that are already totally dead. You're like, there's no hope, like
this.
like there's nothing I can do to make you
You're
interested in
screwed.
life.
Get out. Yeah. That's great.
And then like there's a third of you who are on the fence. It's not clear where you're going to go, and you're the people I'm reaching out to, right? In the hope that you'll
That's
fall to the
great.
right
I
side.
know what you're saying. I know exactly what you're saying. Some of
And
you are
so
helpless and hopeless. You're gone. Yeah.
yeah, and it's like I don't actually, it's not like I literally believe this. It's a little like a stand-up comedy bit. But the point is like, where does the drive to learn and improve ourselves come from? I mean, I think this is like where spirituality, whether it's Buddhism or Christianity or like the Socratic tradition, philosophy, we don't know, actually. We have no idea. And we can say that like, oh, it comes down to good families, but we all know good families who have kids who like fall off the cliff or whatever, and we have kids who go through great school systems. They've been provided every opportunity that the planet can give a person, and they don't do that. And so, we can tell stories and we can talk about how to do better. But I think this soul thing you keep pointing to without really using the word is a deep question that we don't know the answer to,
Wow. Yeah. It makes me think of a question, and kind of ties into what you just said, but would you rather be middle class making $40,000 a year right now, or would you want to be the richest man in the world 200 years ago? And people ask that, really, that's a deep question. Now, people will automatically, without thinking, will say, I want to be the richest man 200 years ago.
Oh, not
So,
me, man.
well, that means you don't have
I
a
like
car.
antibiotics and
That means, right.
and
Right.
I like air conditioning.
Right. So, and it brings up a very good point that you now have access to way more, even at middle class, or even if you're poor.
Yeah.
Homeless people have phones, right? So you have more now than the richest person 200 years ago, which means all of that was done through pretty much, and I look at, it's all innovation from a capitalistic sense. Somebody out there had the idea to solve a problem. And maybe that is the guiding light here, that no matter where we go, I think there will be people in power or out there as entrepreneurs or anybody who can maybe solve problems will always make sure that if there's a problem, very much like Vanilla Ice, somebody will solve it. All right.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful part about this, that innovation will guide us the right way. But if you use it the wrong way, or you let somebody else use it the wrong way, you just got to be smart enough to know that those individuals are the evil ones that you got to stay away from or fight as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that capitalism is tremendously powerful when it comes to innovation and technological change and business model change and all these things. And you can just see it in growth curves. I just show students like a curve of output per capita, like GDP per capita, how much we produce per person, in the United States or in the world, actually. And it's like, it hugs the line. It's from 0 to 2000 is the curve, hugs the line until, like, when capitalism basically starts to take off in the 19th or 18th century. And then it just goes up. And, my old joke is, if it goes up any higher, if it got any steeper, it would come out and poke you right in your eyeball. I mean, that's how high it's going, right? But I think, like, we have to be realistic about the blind spots of capitalism too, right? I mean, the things that capitalism's not great at. And, there's a lot of them. In keeping up infrastructure, we're not always great at. Pollution control, we're not great at. Like, people would have died, many more thousands of people would have died from heart attacks, from smog, if we hadn't limited the number of emissions coming out of cars, as an example. Well, the automakers were not going to solve that problem just out of the goodness of their hearts, because it was expensive. And, and they were going to have to raise the prices of cars to deal with it. So, like, we have to be realistic about, like, capitalism is extremely powerful and it gives us all kinds of new, unforeseen things. We also have to be realistic about where it's not so great and where we need kind of like extra forms of juice here and there, is my take on these things.
Great point. Now, here, I will combat you a little bit with that. So the first car, would you say the first car ever made, was it electrical or gas powered? Do you know? You know the answer to that?
I mean, the Benz tricycle was a gas-driven, it was an internal combustion engine-driven vehicle, but there were not only electric cars, but also steam-driven cars in the first decades when cars came out. So we had no idea what was ultimately going to power it. Yeah.
True. But the first car 40 years prior to the first gas-powered car was an electric car. And was that?
What year is it?
I believe it's 1837, somewhere in there. Somewhere in that area. I got to look it up. But it's fascinating that the first car was electric by years before a gas-powered one. And what's fascinating about that is
it's a locomotive. Yeah. Okay.
It tried. Right? Mm-hmm. The market was there, but the technology was not there. So in time, I don't know if, all right, so yeah, you have the regulation, all that. You're right that maybe there'd be so much smog in California unless they fix the issue. But what if, with time, the entrepreneur out there who says, you know what, I am an electric car maker, technology is available, buy my car, let the free market decide. Do you want the cloudy car that's putting out all kinds of crazy gases, or do you want mine? And so I have this philosophy, whether right or wrong, that the market will always choose the better path for society, right? Let the market decide. So, there is something to be said about those regulations that were put in place, especially in California, which led into certain dirt bikes and cars not giving out the gases that they once did. But if you have enough of a timeline, I think society chooses the right path eventually.
Well, I mean, this is the libertarian position. I don't think it gets us to, pollution control and other health regulations fast enough, frankly. I think it would have taken a lot longer. But I also think we have to think about the role government is playing in making EVs like a reality right now. Tesla and other electric car companies are highly dependent on subsidies. tax subsidies, especially
Yes.
at the consumer level. And
Yes.
so, I mean, like, yeah, it looks like we're in an electric transition. And for the most part, I think that's good, though. My friend Bob Charette wrote a wonderful series called the EV Transition Explained. You should check out. It's on IEEE Spectrum. It's now an ebook. It's amazing, showing all the problems with EVs we're not talking about.
Wow.
There's so many, but I think it's generally a good thing, something to, you know, for us to be pushed for. But the government's playing a huge role in all kinds of ways in us making this transition. I would say good and bad, right? Because like by ordering EVs to be the only vehicles, and as California and some other states
In
are,
12 years, I believe, or 2032, I think. Maybe that's it.
I think we're going to see a number of big problems emerge with that push. And so I don't think we're doing this smartly, actually. I wouldn't do it the way they're doing it. But anyway, I think we have to be realistic that government plays all kinds of beneficial roles in how technological change happens. It's not just regulation, it's also research and sub-tax cuts and all kinds of, you know, government spending, defense spending and stuff that gave us the internet, and so many other things came out of it. You know, that we have to be realistic about the whole picture government plays in this way.
Yeah, it's almost it's a necessary evil. And you know, stepping one side over to the medical world, you talk about innovation with that even. There's a lot of negative things coming down the pike, I believe, in the medical world. Too much innovation, right? It gets into
well, it can be.
It's this pseudoscience that, all right, since you have a headache, it's not the fact that you're not getting enough sleep or not drinking enough water or eating like shit. Just take this pill right here, right? Just take this right here. So it's that. That's that. And I guarantee this fixes that headache, but it could create 5 other ones. So medically, I don't know if innovation is on our side. Yes, maybe we're living longer on average, but we're not living longer, period, right? There were people back 300 years ago who
we're
lived
declining.
to 95, 100 years old, right?
Well, though we know that in recent years, life expectancy in the U.S. is declining, especially amongst men. There's a wonderful book. It's kind of philosophical. It's called Medical Nihilism by something Stegegna. Nihilism, you know, and it just shows that how rarely the medicines we use today actually like contribute that much to quality of life or extended life or anything like that, you know.
Agreed.
And, you know, Andy and I joke that, like, you know, the opioid crisis is an innovation story. It's not something people want to talk about, but it's definitely innovation. It's getting a new product out there. It killed hundreds of thousands of people. It was terrible, but it's an innovation story, right? It's a new thing getting out in the world. You know, we joke about crack cocaine is also an innovation story. It involved risky entrepreneurship called drug dealing, but it's still about innovation, you know? So, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I think there's all kinds of, you know, things, pills and medicines we've introduced that show, you know, like antidepressants. How effective are they? We don't, you know, it's a wash, basically. And so, yeah, I mean, I love the Stegegna book, Medical Nihilism is a real fun one if you want to think down this road, just to, like, you know, certain antibiotics are you know, I want them around. They have benefited and probably saved my life. We've also overused them and created super germs. I mean, so, you know, it's very complicated, but there's a lot of medicines and procedures we've introduced that have not really improved our life that much. It's true.
And that's really what I want to relay, is that not all innovation is good. And I think that in order for you to have a clear decision on what is good for you and what isn't, you just have access to all the information and have a choice. I am a guy who believes that as long as I have the information and I make the choice, that's all that matters, right? So if what I do to me and for me is not going to hurt any other life form, I should have that choice. And
do you identify as a libertarian?
I would say yes. I'm close to it. I wouldn't say I'm close to it. There's a lot of libertarians out there who I don't really, I look at and say, you know, I've never voted for a libertarian on the ticket. But I truly love the act of freedom and freedom in general. And I think that libertarians, they have this approach where it's like there is a lot of apathy there. Well, it does, you know, total freedom and it doesn't matter what you do. there are some things that I still kind of hold true to. I have a Christian nature, so there are certain boundaries that I think there should be in place, whether that's
Got it.
put on, but that maybe that's put on you as a person having the moral code and moral ethics.
Yeah. I hear you.
So there's that to it. I'm close to it though, very, very close.
Yeah.
But anyways, when it comes to the innovation, I just think that if individuals can be very weary on what is coming down the pike, and the people who are pushing the innovation, knowing that they may not have your best interest at heart, I think that's just crucial. And so it seems to me like you align with that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, we should never assume, businesses they have their profits, not always, but many businesses ultimately are driven by their profits, right? And so sometimes that does not align with human well-being on any dimension. And so, or, the dimension of users and even non-users if it's pollution. So, I think that we just need to be realistic about that. Sometimes like certain kinds of interests do not align with the public good, right? Or even the individual good ultimately. Yeah.
Right. So, the best way to get a hold of you, you have multiple books. You have 2 books right now. You're working on a 3rd one, I think you said, right?
Oh yeah, and a 4th one and a 5th one. It'll go on forever.
You're a writer at heart. One question I ask, outside of the books that you have written, what is a book that you recommend for the listeners, right? So we are all about life-changing, defining moment books. What's one that you recommend to our listeners?
Give me one. So there's the book, it's not even out yet, but it's kind of come out in the new year, and it's pretty exciting. I think I would love for you to read it, and then you should bring Ben on and you guys can argue about it, because I think some of it would ruffle your feathers, but it'd be awesome. It's called
I like those type of conversations, by the way. It seems like we agree with a lot. I think we couldn't get into the battle, but
it's just like, I don't understand why people can't have friendly disagreements and riff. We don't have to hate each other, right? Right. It's by my Ben, that too. It's by my friend Benjamin Waterhouse. The book's called One Day I'll Work for Myself: The Dream and Delusion That Conquered America. And he really goes after the kind of entrepreneurship.
Let him at me. Let him at me. Let's go, baby.
Yeah, and he says it just doesn't work out that well. Most people fail and they never get back up, blah, blah, blah. And, and so I think it would be a fun book for you to check out, and also to have Ben on to riff with. You guys could have fun together.
Yeah.
Dude, I'll even show up. It could be a 3-way conversation. I could be like the other voice in the room. It'd be fun.
Please. I would love that intro, just because I think that'd be very interesting. The reason why is, if you know anything about my story, entrepreneurship has not only defined me as a person, it gave me self-awareness, but it set me free. It gave me everything I've ever wanted. So individuals, and I didn't grow up in a household that was entrepreneur-like. It was a family that was against basically my want for starting a business from nothing. And it's not that they didn't want me to start a business. It was they were afraid that I would fail. And yes, I failed 4 times and $300,000 in debt, but my 5th business succeeded, and I made some money, and it turned into a whole other machine outside of that. So I believe entrepreneurship and capitalism is the key to health, wealth, and happiness. So get him on the podcast.
You guys could go at it for ages. I would listen to that. That sounds like a hoot. Yeah. He would say that you're the exception, and I think statistically we can show that.
Yeah.
You have stick with itness that most people simply don't have, Yeah.
Well, maybe that's it, right? It doesn't take skills as in like you were born with resources and an IQ. It might take more than that. And that's that stick-to-itiveness that you elaborated on. It's required. So, man, this has been interesting. And I thought when I read your bio, I was like, he's a Pittsburgh guy. See, Steel Man. So turns out you're not, but I still like him, man. Carnegie Mellon. Any last stories of Pittsburgh that you can share while you're on this?
Oh, no, man. I love Pittsburgh. And I think it is like, unfortunately, I think it's kind of an exception for the Rust Belt because it's done so well. But I do think it's come back in big ways. And, culturally, I love it. I love all the neighborhoods and the different scenes and the dive bars in this neighborhood versus that neighborhood and the whole thing. I just love Pittsburgh so much, and So I also, Carnegie Mellon just taught me, you know, I'm tremendously grateful for the doctoral education I received there. It has done so well by me. Yeah.
Have you read The Last Lecture by what's his name?
Yeah, that happened when I was there, actually.
Wow. Okay. That
I
was
didn't see it.
2010, 2008.
Yeah, yeah. I was already not around. Because once long story, but I ended up moving to Missouri while I was still writing my dissertation. And so I wasn't there to see it, but it happened there and the book came out while I was still a student there. Yeah.
Yeah, I recommend this, guys. If you're out there listening, pick up The Last Lecture. I don't know the author's name. If I heard it, I would definitely know. But
Randy something or other,
Randy
right? I can't remember.
Pausch. Randy Pausch,
There
I
you go.
believe.
There you
Yes.
go. Yeah.
So yeah, great book. But anyways, I have to say, Lee, thank you so much for your time. And guys, get in touch with him. Pick up his book on Amazon and look for the podcast with me, him, and his friend Ben, hopefully in January.
Yeah.
So,
And please, I also have a podcast called Peoples and Things where I interview people who study technology and society. So if people are interested in the issue of like how technology affects businesses and stuff, I talk to people who do that. It's
Peoples and Things. It's on Spotify.
Yeah. It's everywhere. Yep, exactly.
Beautiful. Guys, look them up. So thanks so much, Lee. Remember,
Thank
guys,
you.
$1 million book will lead to $1 million life. Right on.